study jams. So coming to the previous session, did someone go back and try to make stuff like some app using stuff that was taught in the previous session? Did someone try out something? No one did. How did you make some app? Anyone? Okay, so basically, you have to go back and you have to explore stuff on your own, because whatever I'm teaching you in this sessions is definitely not enough for you to become an Android developer. You have to go back and explore and make creative apps with what is being taught that day. And I'm sure that most of you would have got the badge at least, and if you have not got the badge also, just go back, go through the code lab, have your Android Studio open and run the code, copy paste the code from there to here, and run the code, and you might get the hang of Android Studio and developing Android apps. So yeah, let's get into today's session. So today's session will be about getting input from the user. So from the previous session, we also got an input from the user, which is basically nothing but clicking a button which would roll the dice. That was also an input, but the main aim of the app was not oriented around the input from the user. But the today's app will be much more user input centric. So you'll be working around getting input from user and displaying the output according to the input and stuff. So let's get into it. And once this session is done, just go to the developer course and get your badge for this and try out, take an Android Studio and try out, some app of your own, and try to, show it, or just tell that you did this app in the next session. Okay, let's get into today's session. Okay, like I said, today's session is about getting user input in an app. The classes and inheritance part and all, it was covered in session 3, I guess. So you just go through this, take the code labs, and the stuff that are given in this is pretty basic stuff, which I taught you much more advanced stuff in the session that we had previously. So this should just be a cakewalk for you people. And we'll start with this create XML layouts for Android. Okay, so this is actually what we'll be doing today. We'll have an app which is gets the cost of service as edit text view, which would accept numbers, and you will have 3 radio buttons. One for amazing, which would tip 20%, and other would give the tip as 18% and 15%. And then you would also have a switch key which would enable rounding up of tip. And then there is a calculate button which would calculate and give you the total amount, which is nothing but the cost of service plus the tip. So this is basically our app that we'll be doing. And the UI elements that we'll be using to build this app will be edit text, basically for getting the text, which is nothing but the cost of service, and the text view, to display this, how was the service and tip amount and stuff. And the radio buttons, which are a selectable button for amazing, good, and okay, and that the radio group is nothing but the collection of these 3 buttons is called radio group. And finally, we have a switch which is toggles on and off, and would help us figure out if the user wants the tip to be rounded up or not. First, we'll start with creating an empty project as usual, and so like always, what we do here is we usually my favorite way of doing is dragging stuff from the palette into the screen and aligning it according to and with respect to the constraint layout. But in this code lab, they have asked us to experiment with editing the actual XML file. So we'll also be doing that in this session instead of dragging things from there. Though dragging from the palette and putting it in the screen is much easier to work with, and it's enough for you to work with while you are working with basic apps. But when your apps gets more complicated, you need to sometimes go and edit the XML file manually, which is much more efficient than working with the design palette. So you can go through these some pretty basic stuff once the session gets done, and I'll show you how to do this without doing. Okay, so these are pretty basic stuff. We'll just get to the part where we'll go to Android Studio now. As usual, we'll start with an empty activity, and the name we take calculator. Yes, the minimum is fine. Language is open. Let's just wait for this Gradle build to complete. Okay, we have our new project. So the layout file, the for main activity will be inside res resources layout activity main.xml. And like I said, you can also just delete this and keep inserting text views and some edit text and whatnot, some buttons, switches. So you can simply do that, but instead they've asked us to uh, use the XML file just for the people to get a grasp of it. So we'll be doing that now. Okay. Yeah, someone also told me that the font was not visible for them. So after the session got over, so if you could interrupt me and then and there tell me such things, I would have. I didn't notice that the font was not clear for you people because I didn't. You people didn't say it to me at that time. So just if something is not clear or if you have some trouble, just let me know and we can work it out. First, I'm going to remove all of these from the layout. Yeah, so is the text clear now? Is it like visible? somewhat for you people?
No, we are not seeing the screen.
You're not seeing the screen. Okay, one
No.
sec. Is it visible now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so are the fonts visible? Like, is it big enough?
Yes, font is visible.
Okay, cool. So I just have a basic XML layout, like it just has the constraint layout in it. So this tag at the top is nothing but it just says that it's an XML document. Version is 1.0 and the encoding is UTF-8. You don't have to worry about that. So the firstly, it has got the constraint layout is on the root of it. Uh, and this XML NS is nothing but its XML namespace, which is says that the this Android is denotes the Android namespace, and namespace is basically something which tells you that this one comes from this place. Let's say you are using the square root function. For that, you need to have the math headers or math library in your namespace. So that is basically what namespace does, and this XMLNS stands for XML namespace, which just says Android that this particular thing comes under the XML namespace, and these Android and tools would mean the same thing, that each and everything belongs to its own namespace, and the corresponding functions are from the namespace mentioned before them. First what we saw was the edit text. So we'll just use that. Uh, and there is one other difference between this normal edit text, and there is something called androidx.constraint layout. You can see this, right? So this normal edit text is nothing but it's the one provided by Android SDK by default. And this Android X dot constraint dot layout, this thing, there is something called Android Jetpack. You don't have to really worry about this right now. This Android Jetpack, just for some, you can take it as fun facts. Android Jetpack is a set of libraries which provide all of these components, but with some extra features. Uh, Basically, that's the difference between the normal components provided by Android SDK and Jetpack, Android Jetpack. If you want to use Android Jetpack, which has got much more features, you can go ahead with Android X dot the component, or you can use this normal edit text or normal components also. So let's get into it. And firstly, what you have to, I'm just initializing the edit text, sorry, and each and every XML tag should end with uh, slash and the closing bracket. First of all, the layout width, it can be match parent. Just make it match parent, which would parent of this, which is nothing but edit text parent is nothing but the one above it, which is the constraint layout. So the layout width of the edit text would be the layout width of the constraint layout. So basically, edit text would take the width of the constraint layout as its own width, and layout height would I would give it wrap content, which is nothing but just to have sufficient height to occupy whatever the content is there in the edit text. Next thing I want to give it is Android ID. Uh, as you can see, the Android Studio would suggest which one to give. Always take the plus ID thing. And one more thing that I didn't do in the last session is that always name your IDs using the I think it's snake case, which is nothing but you have to write it like this. Uh, tip, sorry, service underscore amount. So this type of naming is necessary for using view binding. We'll be looking at it in this session. So always name your IDs this way. So our edit text now has a layout width, layout height, and an ID. So like I said in the previous session, since it's a constraint layout, your components or views must have some constraints with them. So we'll start with to start off. These you don't have to actually remember these. Just for these part alone, I usually go to the design view, and I just use those arrows like I showed you the last time. There is constraint start off, and constraint top to top off. You don't actually worry about these things. Just go to the design view and drag those arrows, and you'll be fine. Okay. Someone just joined now, and okay, we're just starting out, and today we'll be making an app which is centered around getting input from the users. So yep, that's what we've been doing. You haven't missed much. Just pay attention from now on. And since, as you can see from the name, you can this input view, you can get text as well from this. So basically, the service amount edit text, I can go there and write some alphabets, but I don't want that to happen, right? Because it's an amount, I just want numericals or just numbers. So I would mention the input type as number decimal. So we have the edit text ready with us now. So we can just view the design ones. Yep. So this is basically our edit text here. Let's go to next thing we need to have is the text view to tell people to enter their text here. And I would just give the layout with this match parent, and layout height is wrap content. And the next thing we need is the ID, which would be service amount text. And next thing we need is we have to give the constraints. So constraint start to start of parent, and constraint top to bottom of nothing but the previous one, which is service amount. So since this is the text view, you should also mention the text that it should display. So what is the text here? It's nothing but enter the service amount. You close the package, and you can see that this block of code is highlighted in yellow. So you just have to press Control Enter, or if you click it, you will have a yellow bulb here, and you just have to click the extract string resource here and just click OK. So basically what it does is you can see that the text has changed to add string slash enter the service amount. So what happens when you don't actually write the exact text here, and instead of doing that, you reference the string from somewhere else. So let's say you want to switch this app to some other language, like French or Indian languages like Hindi or Tamil. So at that time, you just can't go to each and every version of your app and keep changing text there and releasing the APIs. Sorry, APKs. So instead of that, what we do is we create string resources, uh, which is basically what I did here, and you can use that to reference strings from the collection of string resources, and uh, and you can just point that string resource at this text field. So this also basically makes your translating your app easier and to change all the text at once. It's very simple, like just go to just enter some text here, and you will have the yellow bulb, or you can press alt enter, and you just have to press extract string resource, and basically that's it. So let me just revert this back. Yep. So these are just some like facts or better coding practices that I keep telling you. So these are not necessary to get your app ready, but these would make your app look better or work better. Now let's look at the design. Yeah, so I'm not sure if you can actually see this. So we have a text view, I mean edit text here, and a text view that says enter the service amount. But as you can see, this text is very small. So I'm just gonna go back here and write text size and change it to, let's say, 32 SP. Yep, it's I would say it is sufficient right now. So the next thing that we want to do is have the radio buttons. First, we need the radio group. The same thing, the width would be match parent, and the height would be wrap content, and I need every view needs an ID, and I would give it as radio group. The ID is radio group, and we need the constraint. So start. Let's go to start layout constraint, start to start of parent, and to bottom of the previous view, which is nothing but the text service amount text. Yeah, so we are good to go with this. The next thing that we have to do is we need to add the radio buttons. So basically the radio button is the actual, the buttons that you click on the screen, and the radio, the radio group just acts as a wrapper around the radio buttons. So now that we have our radio group, let's start with our radio buttons. So as you can see, this is another way of closing your XML tags. Like you would have seen this type of closing tag. This is also valid, and you can also use this. But since we need to have radio buttons inside the radio group, we'll be using this kind of closing tag. And since there is nothing inside the text view, we use this kind. But it's also possible to have this kind of closing tags as well. But since it's unnecessary, we just stick to this kind of closing tag. Let's start with the radio buttons. Yep, the same thing. Just give wrap content and match parent. Oh, sorry, it's the other way around. The width. I need my width to match parent and the height to wrap the contents of the radio button. And like I said, every view needs an ID. We'll give it as the first one is the amazing button, and what else do I need here? Yeah, I need the text for this. So the text is again amazing. So you would give the tip as 20%. You don't have to actually extract text right now, but when you make your actual app, you can make use of the extract text stuff. And give it this match parent and wrap content. Again, the ID. Every view needs an IDE. Next thing is good button. Finally, we have the text as good. It should be a 15% tip. Turn to our final radio button. This is nothing but OK button. And we need the text to be displayed as OK, and the tip amount is 10% of the service amount. So we now have the 3 radio buttons enclosed inside the radio group. Let's look at them. Yes, like you see, there are 3 radio buttons: amazing, good, and OK. With 20%, 50%, and 15%, and 10%.
Excuse
So
me.
yes,
Where did you ensure that the radio buttons are arranged like this vertically and not side by side?
uh, by default, this radio group has the arranges the radio buttons vertically. You can also, have something called orientation and write horizontal. And okay, since I've written, this with this match parent, it's not displaying it. Let me fix that. Uh, I'm just changing this to wrap content for now. Yeah. So basically, this radio group just make sure the orientation is vertical by default. If you want to change it to horizontal, you can do that, or you can just remove it, or you can give orientation as vertical. It's up to you. Right?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So we have the edit text now and a text view that says enter the service amount here, and we have 3 radio buttons which says about the uh, tip percentage that we'll be giving. So the next thing we need is the switch to tell to ask the user if he wants to, you know, round off the tip or not. So again, I'm giving the same thing: layout with as match parent and this to wrap content. By default, we'll give it an ID, uh, round tip switch, and we need to have a text for this. So we give it text. So the text would say round tip, and we'll have the we need to give it constraints like we always do. So to start off parent and to bottom of the previous one, which is the radio group. Okay, so you also have something called checked, which is nothing but if you want the initial state of your switch to be, true or false. So why is it still low? Okay, so basically we have, this is our design till now. We have after the radio group, we have the round tip switch. And the next thing that we'll be doing is adding a button that would say calculate. So switch is done. We'll add a button. The width is match parent and the content. We'll give an ID. So it is calc button. So this button should be aligned to the bottom of this switch, which is nothing but the ID is round tip switch. So this button is also done now. We need to give it. Let's look at the design first. Okay, so the button has no text. I forgot to give the text. So the text will be calculate. This calculate is fine. Yep. So I think our UI is ready for now. So all we have to do is just get the input from the user, and when someone presses the calculate button, we just have to display it here. So yeah, where do we display it? We'll come to that now. So after the button, we need to have another text view, match parent. So just give ID as final amount text, right? So this should come after calc button. Okay. Yes, I think that's it for now. Let's look at the design. Okay, we have okay, this is our final UI. We have the edit text where the user would input the service amount. We have 3 radio buttons which ask the quality of the service to calculate the percentage of tip, and we have a switch which would ask the user if he wants to round the tip, and then we have a button which says which would calculate the tip and add it to the final amount, and it would display in the final text view that we have here. So our UI is done. The next thing that we have to do is add some logic to get the input from the user and calculate the tip. Let's get into that. Okay, just hold on a second. Sorry for that. Yeah, sorry folks, my Chrome just crashed. Not sure why. Okay, am I audible now? Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, okay. Okay, so the last session we had, I just told you people have to, access a view or to get an instance of a view and to get the reference of a view. How did you do that? Any idea, someone? If someone answer. Like we had some view in our layout file and I wanted to, use that in my code. How did we do that?
We called it through its ID.
Yeah, how did we call it?
I don't
What was
remember.
the name of the function that we used to call it?
Find view by ID.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So that is usually how things were done before, and then there were some great innovations, and we now have something called view binding, You can still use find view by ID in your apps, but once you get comfortable with find view by ID, you'll have to move towards view binding, which is much more efficient and easier to work with, I would say, because when you use find view by ID, you have to use the function find view by ID and give the ID of each and every view that was there in your layout file. But using view binding, you don't have to do that anymore. Like, you just create one binding class, and you can directly access each and every view element from that class. So we look at what view binding is. If it's difficult for you to understand view binding, just stick to find view by ID, and then later come back to this, and you can start picking up view binding from there. So what we'll be doing is, first we'll enable view binding in build.gradle file. I'll explain that to you when we go to Android Studio after this. So let's say we have some button and a text view and a text edit view. So basically, we'll have one call for each of these views, like find view by ID this button, and find view by ID this text view. The same way, we'll have another find view by ID call for the edit text. So this is very inefficient, and you will take up lots of code for this basic or this inefficient work. But instead, we have the activity main binding, which is nothing but a binding object which has references to all the views in your layout file that has an ID. So if you have a view in your layout file, and if it has an ID, you can directly access it through this binding object. So imagine this binding object as a collection of all the views in your layout file without having to use find view by ID. So this is the code about how you will use this binding. I'll just explain it when we go to Android Studio. So basically, just look at this piece of code. So val my button, which is of type button, find view by ID r.id my button, and then you'll type my button.text equal to a button. And this is how we were doing it in the previous session. This is how we'll be doing it from this session. So val my button, which is of type button, this is just the same. And here we have binding, which is the binding object that I was talking previously, dot my button. So this just makes our work very simple. You can look at this and this, right? Like, it has my underscore button. You just change it to my capital B button. This is why I wanted, I told specifically to write IDs like this using an underscore. So when using binding, Android would automatically convert this type of thing to camel case. Yeah, so then you can just simply, once you do this, you can simply write it like this. You don't even have to, create a my button variable and then do my button dot text. You can just simply use binding dot my button dot text equals to a button. So this is much more simple than creating variables for each and every view, calling find view by ID for each and every view, and then being able to manipulate them. Instead, you can just simply use binding dot whatever you want, and then you can go ahead with it. So let me show you how to use it in Android Studio. We'll go to Android Studio now. Okay, so firstly, you can see something called Gradle scripts here, right? So here, this is So before that, what is Gradle? So Gradle is nothing but it's a tool, or yeah, you can say it is a tool to bundle your app or to build your app. So you have these lots of .kt, which is nothing but Kotlin files, and you have a lot of XML files, and you have a lot of like we used in the previous session, we had a lot of drawables or images, and much more files that you can see on the site, like drawables, bitmap values, and lots of that. Uh, all of these have to go inside a single APK, which you should be able to install in your Android devices. So this entire task of taking different pieces of code and files and building it into a single APK file is the job of this Gradle, and also to take care of various dependencies, like if you use some other libraries that are provided by others, you want to use that in your app. So all of these is taken care by this Gradle. So this grade build.gradle file is basically like a configuration file for your Gradle. So if you want to alter some of your properties about the build system, this is where you go. And here we have to go to build features. Okay, build features not here, so we'll just add build features and view binding equals true. So we have enabled view binding now. Since we have changed the build.gradle file, you have to sync your project again, because this would change the entire way that uh, your project was previously understood by Android Studio. Okay, now that we have enabled view binding, let's look at how we can work with it. Okay, the screen is visible, right? Is my Android Studio visible?
It's visible.
Okay. So first of all, what we okay, so for a basic Kotlin program, when you run it, the command first goes to the main function. Like that, I told you the command first goes like for an activity starts. Where does it go? Can someone tell me if you remember from the previous session?
On create function.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So yeah, like I said, the command first goes to onCreate function. But what we do is we use something called late init. I'll come back to that later. So we initialize this binding object before the onCreate function. So why do we do that? Any idea? Anyone? Okay. So like I said, there are various functions like onCreate. The first control or the first piece of code that one of the first pieces of code that get executed when your activity starts is the onCreate function. But I also showed you other types of functions like onPass and on resume, functions like that. If you remember from the diagram that I showed on the from the official under documentation in the previous session, you might remember this. So this binding should also be accessible from all of these activity life cycles as well. Let's say let's just take our own app that we have right now. We had the edit text, right, where the user inputs the text. So let's say I just inputted 1987 something, the bill amount, and I want to switch to another app. So if I do that, and if I come back to here later, that number that I entered previously, the 1987 or something, that would have gone. That would have been gone. But I don't want that. So what I would do is I would go to this onPass function, and I would save the value here. So to be able to save the value here, I should be able to access that edit text, right? So that's why what I will be doing is binding dot edit text dot text. So this is how I get the text from there. So for me to be able to use this binding here, I should declare this binding variable above the onCreate function. You get my point? Any doubts with this? Why we declare this binding variable here? No doubts, right? Okay. So basically, we have to access this binding variable from other parts of the onCreate function as well. That's why we do this here instead of inside onCreate. Okay. So let's get to the part about this late init. What is this late init? So like the name says, you will initialize this variable later. Since this thing is outside this onCreate function, you cannot actually initialize it here. So we'll have to initialize this binding variable inside the onCreate function, because onCreate is the first function that would be executed by the activity when it is launched. So this late init just tells that it's just a promise that I would initialize this binding variable at a later point of time. What happens if you don't initialize it and then directly access the binding variable? Your app would just simply crash. So since we have promised Androids that I would initialize this binding at a later point of time, I would initialize it here. So basically binding, it's activity main binding dot inflate layout inflator. So these are just boilerplate code. You just have to kind of remember it. The more you use, it would be easier for you to understand. Let me just remove these. Okay, so we now have our binding object created and ready. So you can think of this binding object as as an object or as an entity of your layout. So you don't have to set r.layout.activity main as the content view. What we do is we just use binding.root. So what we did here is we have binding. We first declared the binding variable and gave its type as activity main binding. And we told that we also added the keyword late init, and we told Android that just declare this variable right now, and before using the variable binding, I would initialize it, and we have initialized the binding variable here. which is done by activity main binding dot inflate layout inflator. Just you have to remember this. It's at this point you don't have to deeply look into what this does, and then you use set content view of binding dot root. So this is basically how you set up view binding inside an Android app. Since we have this, let's get going with our app. So the next thing that we'll be doing is our job is to calculate the tip right now. So we'll just start with binding dot. As you can see, Android Studio itself suggests what are all the views that we have in it. We have the amazing button, calc button, final amount text. So this is very much easier than using find view by ID and going back and checking what was the ID of it and creating a variable for it and assigning that to this. So this just makes our life very easy. So I'm just gonna take the calculate button and set on click listener to it. And inside that, I'm just gonna call a function called calculate tip. Like you can see, this is highlighted in red because there is no function called calculate tip. I'm just creating a function, private function calculate tip, and we can start writing the code from here. So before we calculate the tip, we need a few things, right? Like first of all, we need the total amount that was entered in the text view that we provided. So we'll first get to that. So it's nothing but the service amount, which is binding dot service amount dot text, right? So we now have the text that was entered in that edit text. What we need to do is, since this is numbers, and we specifically mention the type as number decimal, we'll just write. This is not possible. One sec. Val service. Let's just say service cost equals to service amount dot. Okay, sorry for that. So for this 222 work, Kotlin has to be certain that this service amount is a string. So what we do is we binding dot service amount dot text and we change it to string. And then from that we take the service amount and convert it to double, and it is stored in service cost now. Then what we do is we have to get the tip percentage, right? We have 3 radio buttons and we just have to get the button that was clicked by the user. So we'll just have this as selected percentage, right? That works. So binding dot it's radio group dot checked radio button ID. Fine. So now the selected percentage has so the selected percentage will have the ID of the button that was that is being selected by the user. The next thing to do is we have to find now we have the ID of the radio button that was selected. Now we'll just get the percent, actual percent from it. We have we'll just use a when statement. We'll have selected percentage, and if the selected percentage is r dot id dot amazing button, right, we will have 20%, right? And if it is r dot id dot good button, we have it as 15%. And if it is r dot id dot OK button, we have it as 10%. Else we'll just give it 0% tip. Fine. So is it clear till now? What we did is we took the radio group. Binding.radio group would just give us the radio group that we have in our UI, and we just asked for the check radio button ID. So this would just give us the ID of the radio button that was selected. So let me just go to that. Okay, so let's say the user has clicked this good button, right? So what happens here is that okay, so what happens here is that binding.radio group dot checked radio button ID. This would store the ID of this good button inside the selected percentage variable. Any doubts till this part? Does someone have any doubts till this part? No, right? Okay. One sec. Okay. So now that we have the ID of the radio button that was selected, stored in the selected percentage variable, we then find the value of the we just find the value of the percentage using using this when statement. So when selected percentage, like we know, this selected percentage has the check radio button ID. We'll just give the different cases as the IDs of the radio buttons that are available. So the first one is r.id.amazing button. If that is what is present in this selected percentage variable, you this when statement would return 20 and it would be stored in the variable percent. If the ID stored in selected percentage is r.id.good button, then this would return 15 and it would be stored in selected percentage and so on. So now that we also have the percentage of the tip also with us, we have to then know if the user has selected the round tip thing. Again, we'll just create another variable is rounded. This is of type boolean. Let's have it as boolean. And again, we'll just use the binding dot round tip switch dot is activated. Oh, sorry, I think it's checked. Okay, so if it is checked, which means that you have to, round the tip. So is rounded will be true. So if the button is not checked, is rounded will be false. Just let me change it to is tip rounded. Okay? So it would be better for you to understand. So we have all the inputs from the user with us. All we have to do now is calculate the tip and display it in the view that we have already created in the layout. Okay, so we have the service cost with us. Let's create a new variable called final amount, which is equal to service cost, right? Plus service cost into percent divided by 100, right? So this is the final amount right now. Let it be like this. Then what we do is if is tip rounded. So if it is true, we have to round this final amount. That is what we'll be doing. So what we do is final amount is equal to Kotlin dot math dot round of final amount, right? Okay, since I declared it as val, like val, once you assign a value to val, it cannot be reassigned. So I'm going to change it as var, and now we are good to go. So if this is false, I mean, if the user does not want to round the tip, so basically this block of code would not be executed. This block of code would not be executed, and your tip would not be rounded. So I think that's it. We have yep. I think that's it. All we have to do is we have to just set the text that we have set the text in the view that we have already created. I'm again going to use binding dot final amount text. So this is the ID of the text view that we created in our layout, equals to dot text equals to final amount dot toString. Right. So I think that's it. We just have to run our app now and check. So let's go through the entire code again. Okay, before that, let's check if our code is actually working or not. Let me run it. So the Gradle build is taking some time. Okay, let it keep running. Let's look at our code another time. Is the code visible? Are you able to see my code?
Yes, we are able to see.
Okay. First, we created a late init variable binding, which is of the type activity main binding. So we have to place this binding on immediately after the class main activity thing, because this binding variable should be able to be accessible from not only from on create function, but also like we have created this calculate tip function, right? So this binding variable should be accessible from this also. So that's why we declare the binding variable here, and we give it the name late in it. We add a keyword late in it, which just means that which is just a promise to Android that I would initialize this variable at a later point of time. So then we have our usual super call to the actual onCreate function, and then we initialize the actual binding variable here. So just remember activity main binding dot inflate of layout inflator, and then you have to change the set content view to binding dot root. It would initially be r dot layout dot activity main. We don't have to use this now, since we have shifted from the layout oriented thing to binding oriented. So all you have to do is binding dot root, which is so basically this root is nothing but the constraint layout, or the constraint layout was the first or the parent of all the views in your layout file. So you set the content view as that, and then what we do is we set an on click listener on the calc button, and inside that, if someone clicks this button, this the block of code inside this on click listener will be executed, which is nothing but a function called to this calculate tip. Then we have our calculate tip function. First, we get the service amount as a string, binding dot service amount dot text dot toString. This would give the amount entered by the user as a string to us. Then we use that and we convert it to double. We have the service cost with us now. Then we have the variable selected percentage, which is nothing but binding dot radio group dot check radio button ID. So this selected percentage is nothing but it contains the ID of the radio button that is selected. So now that we have the ID of the radio button selected, all we have to do is figure out the actual percentage. So we use a when statement. We give selected percentage as the argument. If the ID of the radio button selected is r.id.amazing button, we return 20 into this percent. And if it is good button, we return 15. If it's okay button, we return 10. Just for some, to prevent your app from crashing, use 0 if the ID does not match any of these. Then we have a boolean called isTip rounded, which is nothing but round tip switch dot is checked. So if the round tip switch is checked, this isTip rounded variable becomes true. If it is not checked, isTip rounded becomes false. Then we have a variable called final amount, which is nothing but the service cost plus the tip, which is nothing but service cost into percent by 100, right? Then we have this isTip rounded, where we if it is true, we use kotlin.math.round of final amount to round the value. If it is false, then this statement does not get executed and your final amount is not rounded. Then finally, we take the binding.final amount text, which is nothing but a view in our layout where which we created to display the final amount, and we assign the final amount dot toString, which is nothing but a string of the final amount. We assign it to the text that we created in the layout. So basically, this is what our app does. I hope it is very simple for you. Yeah, can you see our app here? Is it visible? Can someone confirm if the
it is visible.
okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So let me enter the amount as like 2635, right? and the service was good, and I don't want to round the tip. Let's hope the app does not crash. Yep, it doesn't. So, okay, if I give it as 10%, it will be easy for us to verify. Uh, yep, I think the app works, just that this final amount is very small, right? So what do we do for that? All we have to do is we have this binding dot final amount, right? Yes. So we do this binding dot final amount text dot set text size as, let's say, uh 32. And now let's run our app. Uh, okay, let me enter the simple amount of 10,000, and the service is amazing, and calculate. Yep, so we have 12,000 here, and 20% of 10,000 is nothing but how much? 2,000. So 10,000 plus 2,000 is 12,000. So let's do this. Let me close this app. We have our tip calculator here. So what happens if I don't enter anything and just simply calculate? Our app just crashes, right? Because we have a lot of stuff going on here, like binding dot service text dot to string, and then to double. All of these places we assume that an input is present and the input is of type double. So you can add a lot of checks like binding dot service amount dot uh, yeah, like is okay, I forgot the actual code that we have to do. So basically, if you go through the documentation, you can find it. There are certain calls that you can use to check if the data is actually present there. If it's not, you can like I showed in the previous app, you can display a toast saying that this is not entered, kindly enter the amount first, right? So let's try that out now. Let me check if service amount equals, like if it's an empty string, uh, let's just create a toast of type toast equal to toast dot make text context is this, comma, enter an amount, comma, toast dot length long, we'll have toast dot show, right? So let's see if this command works or not. So I'm just clicking. Okay, it's failing. Okay, I'm just not returning it. Right? Okay. Okay, you can see the toast, right? So basically, there is no input given here. And what I do is I get the text from the service amount dot text, and I'm checking if it is equal to a plain or empty string, like our case. In our case, it is it's equal to an empty string. So if it is an empty string, I'm creating a toast that says enter an amount, and then I'm showing the toast and I'm returning from this function. So basically, if I do that, if the user does not give an input and if calculate is pressed, the app wouldn't crash, but instead it would say enter an amount. Right. You can add the same kind of conditions for the radio buttons as well. So basically, that is it for today's session. If you have any doubts regarding this entire app, like how this part was done or how this was done, you can ask me now. And apart from this, you can go through this course like you always do. There are a few more. I've done the app till this calculate the tip part. So basically, till this is where the actual functioning of the app comes into picture. The next thing is changing the app theme and changing the app icons. So these are very intuitive and very interesting. You can and very easy too. So you can. I trust you. People would go through these and try out in Android Studio. And finally, you can get your app to look like this if you follow your yeah. So basically, you can polish your UI like this, like have few icons, have a text edit text view like this, properly align your radio buttons and add icons to this, and display your text to the right and stuff like that. So you can experiment with the different designs and different approaches by yourself. You can it is highly recommended and it is important that you go back to Android Studio and experiment or write your code by yourself. uh, yeah, so I would ask you people to experiment not only with this tip calculator, with much more stuff. All you need to know is uh, the basic apps that you want to build. You can definitely do that with some help with Google or some help from the sessions. It's up to you to go back and experiment with them. If you just simply view these sessions, and if you don't go back and try out stuff by yourself, these sessions are not going to be helpful for you to become an Android developer. So yeah, that's it for today's session. If you want to if you have any doubts, you can ask me now, or if you don't have any doubts, you can leave the session. Any doubts?
Is it required to remember all the function names and the keywords which you write in the XML?
No. It is you don't have to remember everything. Like I think I said this in the in one of the previous sessions. Like even experienced developers don't remember each and everything. They just go back to Android documentation. And one more thing is that even if you sit and remember each and every function or each and everything about this, Android is constantly evolving, and new functions are being added, and old functions are being deprecated and not being used. So it is not advisable to, even if you want to remember each and every functions, you don't have to and you don't need to remember them. Just go to the Android documentation. If you want to create a radio button, just Google radio button or radio group. You'll get the documentation. Go in and read it, and you can just use it there. You don't have to worry about remembering about each and every function. You don't have to fret that there are lots of functions, lots of keywords. You don't have to worry. With practice, all of these will become very easy for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, it's 7:30. We have come to the end. If you have any other doubts, you can post it in the Get Help session. Get Help channel in the Discord server. Thank you, folks. Have a great day. Yeah. You can leave the meeting. I think Bestin, you can end the call. Thanks again.